IVM.
Hi, we're Team Splainer. Welcome to an all-new episode of Press Decode, a weekly podcast where we take Splainer's mission to declutter the news one step further. Check out our newsletter for more stories and follow us at SplainerIn to keep up with all the fun things we plan for our Splainer fam. So sit back, relax, and don't let the news give you the blues. I'm Vagda and I have with me Sarah and Prafulla. Take it away, Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and very much like you would have noticed, Prafulla, I am just as cynical. You think I'm 40-ish, but I'm all of 21.
Hi, everybody. I'm Prafulla Grace, and I'm a little less grumpy at the thought of a long weekend.
Hey guys, I'm Vagda, considering you know Sarah a little bit and now Prafulla too. I am the only glimmer of hope and positivity on this podcast today. Or am I? Listen in to find out. As always, we have 3 segments for you. In our big story, we will talk about where India stands in the fight against climate change. In our Food for Thought segment, we try to wrap our heads around all the outrage on social media faced by many brands and their ad campaigns. Finally, we'll be roasting and toasting our fave or least fave items. All right, let's begin with our big story. Starting October 31st, world leaders are meeting for one of the most important conferences, the COP26, which is short for 26th Conference of Parties, that is, parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC. This is the UN's primary convention to counter climate change. The 21st meeting, that is the COP21, which happened in 2015, resulted in the Paris Agreement. This agreement set targets for the world to curtail global warming. That is, the world needs to limit global warming to below 2 degrees Celsius, preferably 1.5 degrees Celsius by year 2100 in order to prevent catastrophic change to the climate system. And we know we're headed down that path. Right now, given the current pledges to cut greenhouse gas emissions, we are on track for an average 2.7 degree temperature change this century. Temperature rise. Now in 2021, the leaders are taking stock of each other's targets. Every nation party to the convention has committed to some nationally determined contributions, which is their individual national plan to cut greenhouse gas emissions to meet the goals set by the Paris Agreement. Based on estimates, if we, as in the world, cut down our greenhouse gas emissions to net zero, we can achieve the 1.5 degrees Celsius target. But what is net zero? Basically, it means we emit as much carbon as the planet can absorb. So in their NDCs, nationally determined contributions, most of the advanced nations like the US, UK, and Australia have aimed to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. China by 2060, meaning there is obviously pressure on India to commit to net zero emissions too. And here we have India. Up until now, we straight up said no, saying we're a victim of global warming and not a contributor. But yesterday, PM Modi made big ticket announcements, which he called, wait for it, Panchamrit. He committed to achieving net zero by 2070, increased the target for installed renewable energy capacity by 2030 to 500 gigawatts from what was the older target, 450 gigawatt. He also promised to increase the share of renewable energy in India's total electricity generation to 50% by 2030 from 40%, which was set under the Paris Agreement. Then there is the emissions intensity, which is emissions per unit GDP, which will be reduced by at least 45% by the year 2030 from 2005 levels. This target was also 33 to 35% under the Paris Agreement. So we've set very high targets again for ourselves, which is all great and all, but will we be able to do it? And the larger question, will it even make a difference?
Okay, so at the outset, I was a little confused as to why we wouldn't even try making any commitments. I mean, big talk is our favorite game.
It is.
But yeah, I do understand the skewed effects of climate change and more so the skewed burden of climate change on the whole developing versus developed countries. But I've always thought, right, we still must do something for our own sake at least, even if it's not for the world and the greater good. But here's why it's almost impossible to do something immediately. Let me first point out that, to answer your question, Bhakta, that in the larger scheme of things, India's commitment or lack thereof also amounts to very little. Even a theoretical net zero would guarantee the world will achieve, won't guarantee that the world would achieve a 1.5 degree temperature rise by the end of the century, because the top 3 emitters of the world, that's China, the US, and the European Union, alone, despite all their mighty environmental commitments, will emit more than 500 billion tons of carbon dioxide before they reach net zero. And so the target of 1.5 degrees Celsius itself, as T. Jayaraman in The Hindu puts it, is dead on arrival. So, and like to make India's case, India is only responsible for 4.37% of the world's cumulative carbon dioxide emissions, while housing 1/6 of the world's population. So, honestly, any sacrifice, however impractical, actually will amount to barely any impact. But to compound this, there are the actual impracticalities for India. I mean, India is a country that is still trying to lift millions of people out of poverty. And even the bare minimum of power to every household is not a reality, despite the government's claims of 100% electrification. But on a serious note, achieving net zero would require India to retire its coal plants and fossil fuel use overnight, which you can clearly see is impossible given the kind of priorities that we hold and, frankly, even validly give importance to. Unlike other top emitters, India is still in the process of building towards rapid economic growth. A country like China, on the other hand, waited until it had a strong growth trajectory before it announced its pledges to reach net zero. And India is roughly 15 to 20 years behind on the development front as compared to China. Yet, we're expected to somehow make similar pledges with immediate effect.
Correct.
So,
Yeah.
And so let me sum this up. This is what we know so far. The West has pledged to reach net zero by 2050. And India has gone from completely refusing carbon neutrality to setting our sights on 2070. And it's not like we can stick to the timeline that China and the US have, but it also feels like we've royally missed the point of the entire summit.
What is that?
Okay, so here's the thing. Everybody has to pledge to some sort of change by 2050, right? We've given ourselves a wonderful buffer of 20 years to be like, yeah, we'll get there. Even our whole, in the beginning, we said, oh, we're victims of global warming. And we've taken this wonderful route out to say, okay, yeah, we'll get there, but this is on you. But that's mostly, I think, my personal climate anxiety talking. So setting that aside, I will say India has made good on climate actions that we've pledged towards under the UN already. For example, the goal was to get to 40% renewable energy, and we are currently at 38, which is not bad at all. And we're also trying to decarbonize the railway system by 2030 and electrify all industries. So maybe all is not quite lost. But economies everywhere, especially here, since we're still in the phase of development, we are massively dependent on fossil fuel and coal. And cutting emissions will actually be very, very expensive for us. We're already trying to pull people out of poverty. And if we have to balance that and cutting emissions, it's no wonder that we've gone to the summit and said, hey, maybe we will not commit to anything yet. And not to mention the human cost of everyone currently employed in these industries, say coal, because it's an old industry, it's a huge industry. So if we try, even if we try in phases to shut it down, where will you move all these people? How are you going to provide employment? Yeah. So obviously, in an ideal world, we would be decarbonizing way faster with little to no human cost, right? But maybe the tentative steps that we've taken can have impact because, we can't just sit back and say, okay, you take care of this. We will still continue emitting the same amounts of carbon into the atmosphere. But it'll only make an impact if the world doesn't melt by then. I mean, the ocean is already on fire.
Way to go on positive outlook.
I am trying my hardest. I will tell you this.
Yes.
Here's the bare bones of policy changes that with concentrated efforts and proper budgeting might actually help us reach some attainable goals. So the first is a no-brainer, which is conserving and reclaiming forests. And using concentrated action around this can actually help us create something called a carbon sink, which can then absorb the equivalent of almost 3 billion tons of CO2 that we're putting out into the atmosphere.
But this is so surprising because I think I remember reading that PM Modi did not commit to anything with regard to forestation. That is a target that we are failing to reach anyway.
Correct.
And we are not doing anything about it. And we haven't made any new commitments about it either, because we're anyway failing to reach the target set by the Paris Agreement. So your no-brainer is...
But the thing is that that's the first step to getting anywhere, right?
I have logic here.
Yes.
Panch Amrit sounds nice. What is a 6 Amrit?
You're right. No, but here's the thing, that even when we do reclaim forests, we then say, we'll use this land for development. And then reclamation turns into something else entirely. So again, 6 Amrit. I will leave that at that.
6 Amrit.
6 Amrit. Second is phasing out older coal-based power plants, which, like I said, is attainable if we start phasing out the less effective ones, because there's people involved in all these industries that we can't just be like, hey, okay, we're shutting down this factory, go fend for yourself. So if we can start phasing down the really old ones and also reconsider the newer power plants that aren't already being constructed, maybe we can cut down somewhere there as well. Third is electrifying the economy. Although we're still at a very low capacity, even a small chunk of renewable energy across industries is going to amount to a lot, because we're already close to our 40% target. So actually, again, using actionable points is going to help us because it's going to help bolster the economy, which brings me to my last point, which is green hydrogen. If we can actually put the Make in India program to good use and make our domestically produced green hydrogen commercially available, we'll be able to meet energy demands in the country and also provide it globally. So again, like I said, where we fall short in electrical energy, renewable electrical energy, we can also bolster that, as well as our economy with green hydrogen. So 2 birds, 1 stone, all that jazz.
Okay. So there are things that are looking up. I mean, it's not just, at least in terms of renewable energy, our targets may be closer to meet than I imagined.
Problem was just the scheme couldn't have a better name. That's why we didn't have better targets, guys. That's it.
Yeah, but like, why didn't they come up with something like this in 2015? It was still Modi ji.
Don't ask so many questions, Vagda.
Vagda, this could go entirely off the rails if you do this.
Okay. On that note, we come to the end of this segment. We'll be back after a short break. You're listening to Press Decode on the IVM Podcasts Network.
From uncensored and unfiltered chats with the who's who of the entertainment industry, I, Siddharth Kannan, bring your very heartcake chat show called Candid Kannan. Tune in every Friday on the IVM Podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello and welcome back to Press Decode on the IVM Podcasts Network. We're Team Splainer, and make sure you follow us at SplainerIn on Instagram and Twitter to keep up with the Splainer fam. We're now ready for some food for thought. Welcome to the Diwali of outrage, my dears. These last 2 weeks have seen so many brands get targeted over their new collections and ad campaigns. First, we had the Fab India story. The brand was accused of defacing the Hindu festival of Diwali by naming its festival collection Jashn-e-Riwaz for no reason other than the use of Urdu. BJP MP Tejasvi Surya was one of the trolls slamming the brand, and soon #boycott Fab India was trending on Twitter. While the company insisted that this wasn't their Diwali collection, which was supposed to be called Jhilmil Si Diwali, they pulled down their ad as they continued to be targeted by right-wing groups who accused them of unnecessarily uplifting secularism and Muslim ideologies in a Hindu festival and hurting religious sentiments. What the hell is unnecessarily uplifting secularism?
Okay, this I hadn't heard. I actually hadn't heard of this before.
Oh, I mean, you need an occasion you need to necessarily uplift secularism at some point. I don't know what is this unnecessarily uplifting secularism.
I love how secular has just become a slur at this point.
I swear.
Yeah, it is. Aren't you on Twitter enough? It is a slur. I'm a proud secular, you guys. No, but okay, this whole case, they went from Jashn-e-Riwaz to Jhilmil Si Diwali, okay? I think this is just a good case for why we need Urdu.
On good case to why we need Urdu. Have you seen, and the best thing I saw on the internet was this collection by an Urdu promoting handle on social media that did a collection on Bollywood without Urdu, which had edited Bollywood dialogues that had Urdu words into Shuddh Hindi. So then, Ja Simran Ja Ji Le Apni Zindagi became Ja Simran Ja Vyatiit Kar Le Apna Jeevan.
Oh my gosh.
I'm too South Indian to understand the second one.
Shut up, you grew up in Delhi.
What is Vyatiit, dude?
Vyatiit, yeah.
I don't know what Vyatiit is.
Then there was a Dabur ad for Femme Fairness Cream, which pissed people off on all sides of the political spectrum. An ad for Fairness Cream featured a same-sex couple celebrating Karwa Chauth. I mean, I here had only one thought. Pick a side, guys. So you're racist and patriarchal, but A-okay with the gay.
Okay with the gay. It's my tagline for life.
Dabur really said gay rights.
Yeah, they went in the end. It had like the whole pride. Did you see the whole ad? It had like they went full rainbow in the end. Like,
Wow.
it's brilliant.
So a BJP minister, Narottam Mishra, who's really got his priorities right, complained and there was halla. And Dabur took down the ad. And then last month, we had a Seat ad featuring Amir Khan asking people not to burst crackers on the roads, which upset the right wing, which said that it should have addressed the problem of blocking roads for namaz.
Of course.
Because Amir Khan, come on.
Of course.
Latest addition to the list, Sabyasachi, who came out with a Royal Bengal Mangal Sutra. The ad campaign for which there was a woman dressed in a bra and a Mangal Sutra. There was halla, with a section of social media users terming them as against Hindu culture and as obscene. Our Mishra ji, Narottam Mishra ji, issued a yes. issued a 24-hour ultimatum to Sabyasachi saying you withdraw the advertisement, which is an objectionable and obscene portrayal of Mangal Sutra, or else face statutory action. And Sabyasachi withdrew the campaign.
Okay, now I'm going to say something really stupid, okay? But one section of Twitter was very angry that you're doing intimate things while wearing Mangal Sutra. And I'm just like, ye to proof hai shaadi ho gayi. Ab kya chahte ho?
Not out in the open, na yaar.
That was the problem.
That is the thing. So, what are your thoughts, guys? Do you think brands are doing it on purpose to somehow land into controversy and get any kind of visibility? They couldn't possibly be thinking this would do well for their marketing, would they?
Surely that's how you'd have had to like set me up. I am 100%. Like, sue me for thinking this way. But thanks to the Femme ad, I'm convinced, okay, that at least some of these brands position themselves in a moderately provocative way purposely. Like the Femme ad, there was zero chill in the Femme ad. They were just like, oh, we're going to find you and you and you.
That truly.
So, I mean, think about it. Unless your ad campaign was spectacular, there is no way everyone's going to be talking about it. But right now, especially with Fab India, Dabur, and Sabyasachi, my newsfeed was full of outrage about the outrage. And like the saying goes, isn't all PR eventually good PR? And so I looked it up, of course. And voila, shock marketing or outrage marketing is very much real. So even though shock advertising isn't new, in its current form, it came to be with the advent of the internet. So advertisements were adapted in a way that would surely get banned on television. And thus viewers were now so intrigued to go look it up on YouTube and thus help the brand rake in millions of views and, more importantly, visibility.
Interesting.
And now, thanks to social media, shocking adverts go beyond just being attention-grabbing and memorable, but are plain profitable in terms of the returns they come back with. Now, I should clarify here that for the most part, either I couldn't find data about the direct sales effects of specific campaigns, or there's a general consensus across publications and experts that most boycotts only go to hurt a firm's reputation and not its finances. So there isn't much of a boost or a loss. But the point remains that everyone is talking about you. So, for an example, back in 2016, Sprite in Ireland got into trouble for their brutally refreshing billboard campaign. I didn't know about this. I just read about it. The adverts were horribly sexist and had taglines like, she's seen more ceilings than Michelangelo, and you're not popular, you're easy. Yes.
What the hell?
So the campaign, thanks to social media, went viral globally and billboards had to be pulled off. But despite all that, the campaign, even back then, received a whopping 1.6 million plus Twitter impressions. And all this comes with very limited investment. Most ad campaigns for big brands in India cost less than 1 crore. And the digital ones come even cheaper, think rupees 8 to 10 lakhs, and that's today. Yet, outrage allows for disproportionate visibility. But other than this, again, there is consensus that there isn't much effect on sales per se, because essentially, as a professor at Kellogg's puts it, consumers tend to have an empowered voice, but weak behavioral will. Hindutva Brigade. They participate in talking about the boycott, but forget all about it in the shopping aisle. However, another expert also says that this shouldn't be written off as merely a gamble that brands seek to win from. A senior official at Ogilvy points out that, especially in the Indian context, the after effects of these episodes may not affect sales, but they involve an immense mental impact and pressure on those running the brand. And that could eventually cause productivity issues.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so for let me take the social media angle here. So for me, I feel like I'm on Twitter so much. I like to think that I've developed the teeniest bit of immunity because everybody's outraging all the time. But these last 2 weeks have really been pushing it. In our newsletter, if any of our listeners read it, they will know how many times we put up headlines that says, oh, somebody's outraging against an ad, all in the last 2 weeks.
Yep.
It's been one after the other. And somehow these people have all the energy in the world to be up in arms about everything that they see. I don't know how they do it. And obviously, it comes from this place of being like bombarded with information. Everything is designed to elicit a response. And because it's the internet, it makes it happen like clockwork. So, of course, provocative advertising is an actual strategy and it's been around for ages. But is it really an advertising issue if the companies are being forced to pull down so much of their advertising and branding, and they're being boycotted and called anti-national or whatever hell else these people come up with? At the risk of sounding like a conspiracy theorist, I think that those that shall not be named have very cleverly weaponized advertising and social media for their own benefit. I mean, look at every single ad that they have collectively burst a few blood vessels over. They've basically used silliness to distract from things we should be paying attention to. So I will get to that bit in a little, but I do want to shout out, I think it was Shefali Vaidya, who was very outraged about Fab India and called the models in the Fab India some variant of anti-national because they were wearing green. All the while, her Twitter display was a picture of her wearing a green suit. I love this level of self-awareness. Obviously, Twitter also didn't waste any time poking fun at her. But at the root of implying that an actual color is anti-national or, no bindi, no business, it is bigotry, plain and simple. The powers that be have taken the rhetoric of Hindu khatre mein hai and have applied it to everything as far as the eye can see, literally. Whatever they lay their eyes on, they're like, oh, this offends us. This is against our sensitivities. We've been at this point for a while where criticism of the government is discouraged. There's moral policing happening of people's bodies and relationships. And then that turns into stuff like honor killing. And it is so absurd to me that all this is being leveraged for vote banks and political dominance by being labeled cultural sensitivity.
So we're falling for something, we're basically falling for a distraction. That's what we're doing. I'm not doing it. I can see through it. I don't know about you guys.
Well, see, we're still talking about it, no?
Fine. So with that, we come to the end of our second segment. We'll be right back after a short break. You're listening to Press Decode on the IVM Podcasts Network.
Hey everybody, it's been a great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast, DJ and Ashwin discuss how Pakistan won against India, ending its 29-year World Cup streak, and discuss some of the other matches from the Super 12 round of the T20 World Cup. On Agla Station Adulthood, learn all the skincare essentials with dermatologist Puneet Sarogi as Ritasha and Ayushi ask him about skincare routines. On Hans Fani, listen to an interesting story, Dustbin Mein Peek, about how the government targets the common man to divert people's attention from political corruption. On the Habit Coach Kannada podcast, Ashton introduces the concept of a sleep primer and how we can use it for better. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch, Kuber, Flay Coffee, Intel, Kotak Mahindra Bank, and Oxfam India. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back to Press Decode on the IVM Podcasts Network. It's time for our final segment this week, Roast or Toast. So, it's time to give a shit about your planet. But you know who doesn't give a shit? Bill Gates. Mr. Gates threw a big birthday bash where he and 50 of his guests partied on a 107-meter mega yacht that he hired for more than 1 million euros a week. This when mega yachts emit 19 tons of carbon dioxide per day. 19 tons of carbon dioxide per day. This coming from the same man who wrote the book titled How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, the Solutions We Have and the Breakthroughs We Need. Mr. Gates, let me tell you what solutions we need from you. You stay out of the limelight for a bit. You're not having a good time in the press.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Gates, press decode on the IVM Podcast Network. We have things to say to you.
You know who else is not having a good time in the press? Facebook. So the company, not the app, is officially now called Meta. The reason is, this is on my roast list for this week, is because of how much time and effort has gone into separating this new so-called metaverse from all the concerns around this big blue app. They've basically successfully buried any news about Frances Haugen and the Facebook papers. Couldn't all this money have been used to address the actual problem? Also, is it just me, or does Meta sound like this really cartoonish evil corporation?
Yeah. Oh my God. I can think of all the Acme bombs that used to, I don't know, 90s kids, but do you know about the Looney Tunes?
90s kid here also, yes.
Okay.
Ouch. Okay, I'm sensing I'm becoming a more cheerful person of late. And like Prafulla pointed out, it's possibly the holiday season effect, long weekend, woohoo. But I have yet another fave item this week.
Who are you, woman?
What have you done to my grumpy partner?
It's the long weekend. It's a long weekend. Anyway, Chinese influencers stuck in the country due to COVID restrictions have found an amusing way to satisfy their wanderlust. They now pose outside Costco's in Shanghai because, well, the pictures taken there really have the vibe of being in LA. I'm going to link a tweet that has some of the pictures below, and you have to check it out. Like, boy, I love everything about this story. It's so absurd and has just the right hint of Chinese innovation, you know.
Yeah, weren't influencers also telling like other people to go there at around like 4 p.m. when the light is great to get the photos clicked?
Yeah, and they were just like stand outside because that looks more like LA. Like inside, you might see the labels. It's wow, a community.
This is very much giving me South Delhi vibes. I just.
Oh my God, are we pissing people off more than usual?
Festival of outrage.
Okay, that was our show this week. Thank you so much for joining us on Press Decode. You can catch us every Thursday on the IVM Podcasts Network. And guys, please remember, don't let the news give you the blues.
Eventually, you'll see the end of your childhood,
get accustomed to womanhood,
enjoy the experience of sisterhood,
might get to wifehood,
or not, choose motherhood,
or not. You'll learn to define your personhood,
earn a livelihood,
change the neighborhood,
and get rid of the falsehood that life post-academia is easy.
So join me, Ritasha,
and me, Ayushi,
on a journey from station starting point
to station, what now?
Next station, Pudin station, and hopefully Agla station, adulthood.
Fresh episodes out every Thursday.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcast. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.